Santa Fe Art Institute welcomes you back to the Tilt Podcast. We know it's been a while since you last heard from us. Actually, you last heard from writer and Dr. Alicia Inez Guzman and our two Story Maps fellows, Diego Medina and Christian Gehring, during their amazing 9-part podcast series titled Unsettled. You can find that series on our website, SFAI.org. They did a wonderful job with the series, grounded in archival research and oral history and creative storytelling. They narrated relations across time. They weaved in identity crises of present-day Santa Fe and the controversies around monuments and the chronicles of events that began before European contact and continued into Spanish early occupation of Santa Fe in the 17th century. Wonderful oral history. Please go to our website, SFAI.org, and check out the Unsettled series. Thank you, Dr. Alicia, Diego, and Christian, for your wonderful work with the Unsettled series. But we're happy to present to you a new direction for the podcast. You're going to hear a conversation, almost all of a conversation, between the new 3 hosts of this show, including myself and my colleagues, Director of Residency Program, Tony Gentili, and our Strategic Initiatives Coordinator, Netapan Ma. After a period of dormancy and introspection during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, 3 SFAI staff members emerge as the co-hosts of Tilt, with new and exciting directions for the podcast. Listen in on a candid conversation about what we have been up to, the invisible labor of running a nonprofit organization, and the importance of working with care at the intersection of the arts and social justice. This is episode 6, titled Emergence. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us for the Tilt podcast. I am Courtney Andar. I'm the works manager at Santa Fe Art Institute. I'm in my 5th year at SFAI.
Hey everyone, this is Tony Gentili, and it's been a while since maybe you've heard my voice. Kind of when we launched the podcast, I helped start things out and then stepped back into the background for a little while I was focusing on shifting everything around in response to the pandemic. So I'm looking forward to getting back into conversation with you all.
Hi, everyone. I'm a newbie. My name is Netapan. Newbie in the sense that this is the first time you're hearing my voice in the Tilt podcast. I'm super duper excited to be a co-host amongst my colleagues.
Our focus today in introducing ourselves and just kind of coming together for a conversation today is to give you, the listener, an idea of who we are and what we've been doing this past year, or more than a year at this point.
Tilt has taken on, many variations. We've fumbled through multiple approaches, and recently we successfully have invited guest podcaster, researchers, scholars, artists, activists, Alicia, Christian, and Diego, and they've recently completed the Unsettled series, and we want to acknowledge their contribution.
What we're hoping to do here together is to continue that conversation forward, and shine a spotlight on what's happening with different artists and creative practitioners, culture bearers here in New Mexico, and what are some of the unique ways and creative strategies that they're engaging with the various communities here, using art, using collective, collaborative strategies, and just really cool ways of thinking outside the box to solve different problems and bring people together. I think that is very much in the spirit of how we've been working together on shifting this podcast and bringing it forward in new directions. And so I'm really excited about that. So yeah, I don't know about you all, but these past 15 months have just been an incredible ride. And I'm just curious to know a little bit more about how the work that we've been doing has changed, and what are some of the things that maybe weren't so great about those changes brought on by the pandemic, and what's some of the stuff that I don't know, was really transformative that maybe you would like to move on, hold on to as we move forward?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting exploration as we kind of think of what was happening at that time. So just to give the listeners some context, we were in the middle of a residency program, which was going really well. And we just love having residents in the building. It's a vibrant space. It's alive. It's active. We hear each other laughing. We get peaks in the conversations and like just kind of like what life is like for residents as they live in the building. It's a really wonderful experience. We were totally accustomed to coming to the building pretty much every single workday, Monday through Friday, with some variations based on circumstances. But I loved coming to work every single day. And yeah, suddenly things changed that week in March, and we had a really intimate conversation with the residents after, of course, the staff met. And talked about what we can expect moving forward in this, what was being declared as a pandemic at that time by the World Health Organization. And then, of course, the orders started flowing from the state of New Mexico. And we had an intimate conversation with the residents and let them know what to expect in terms of, the need to self-isolate and the fact that the staff would eventually begin working remotely. And we had one final meeting as a staff before we started working remotely. We all basically went home and we, made sure Zoom and Google Meet and all that was all set up. And we started having our staff meetings at home, and that was a bit of an adaptation. So yeah, it'd be great to get some thoughts from you all on what that was like.
So besides your computer, what was the one thing that you thought was necessary to take home with you?
That's a good question.
Sticky notes?
Yeah, I took a few packs of sticky notes home. I think I still have the ones that I took home too. I might have taken a pair of scissors as well, because we always had good scissors in the office.
Surprisingly, I left my plants. I was being optimistic, thinking that this whole thing wouldn't be going on as long as it has been.
Yeah.
The one thing that I made sure to grab was my lavender tea, because I figured I would need some good de-stressing while I was zooming in with you all the time.
Yeah, we left very abruptly. I
Yeah.
left quite a lot of things on my desk. Fortunately, I work, a lot of my files and works are cloud-based, so they're all there. But I do recall taking notepads, sticky notes, and existing working files, so I can use that as reference when I worked remotely. And to be honest with you, this was all new to me. It 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 was a shock to the system, I think, for all of us, um, let alone individually and the organization and how it affects the resident. So it was a total shock, and it took me a good 2-3 months to kind of resituate and acclimate to working at home. I didn't know what that was like, had no clue. And the most difficult part was, yes, we are connected via Zoom, but it was the isolation that was the most difficult for me.
Yeah,
On top
totally.
of trying to stay afloat and searching and working collaboratively to find new ways of reaching out to our audience, our supporters, because pre-COVID, a lot of things that we did were on site. It was in the space, the physical space, the building, as Courtney referred to, was really the heart of SFAI. And when you pluck that heart out, you're left just kind of like out in the cold in a way. And it took me a good 2 to 3 months to even just to resituate, really. I don't know how you guys felt. That's kind of how I felt. We haven't really talked about this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was hard leaving. I mean, especially because, you know, we had a full house of residents, several of whom were international. You know, some folks came from Canada and they were lucky to, you know, book a flight home and get there one day before the borders closed. We had other folks from Greece whose flights throughout Europe kept getting canceled and were having a hard time making it safely out of Santa Fe. And, you know, other people who were kind of doing the artistic nomadic life, right? You know, and not really grounded in a home base. And they had plans for other residencies or, you know, remote living experiences that were abruptly canceled. And so I remember having to work with a handful of these folks to figure out, like, okay, well, I mean, obviously you can stay here as long as you need to, until we figure out what, you know, the next step for you is. But there was just so much fear and uncertainty and and really just totally weird, you know, and I felt kind of helpless not being able to comfort people in person and sit with them in a room and talk this through, or share a meal or a cup of tea or coffee, you know, and that interpersonal connection and cultivating that care for our internal community of artists is so much of how I spent my time. And then to ultimately have that just all of a sudden need to be completely transformed for everyone to be safe. Uh, yeah, it was really jarring. And it did take some time to figure out, like, how do we continue to support our artists moving forward? I mean, obviously it's, you know, we made the decision not to host people in person with the upcoming residents in April. And so, you know, reaching out to those folks and letting them know, hey, given the circumstances, we need to cancel. And sort of taking things piecemeal at first, deciding to do that through the summer. So then we typically host, you know, folks who are on an academic schedule, and then that's followed by our family residents, you know. It just seemed obvious, like, that there was no way that anyone would feel comfortable traveling with their children and their partners or spouses during these really uncertain times. But somehow thinking that perhaps we would get a handle on things by the fall. And so I think it was really like around July or August that it just started to sink in for me that things weren't going to really shift in a positive direction anytime soon. Yeah.
And it's interesting to think about there's these parallel tracks of things that we were adjusting to very quickly. So there was, as Tony talks about here, the adjustment to caring for our residents and reaching out to residents who we were expecting to arrive at, you know, in future cohorts, and trying to, you know, figure out what to do with that. And then there was also, as a staff, you know, we had to kind of get many different things together so that we can work remotely effectively. So, you know, everything from making sure we had the right Zoom accounts to making sure everyone had good internet. You know, we had to actually, one of the interesting things is we had to strengthen the internet at our building so that the server was good enough for us to access remotely. And that was a bit of a struggle working with our vendors to ensure that that took place. There were different things we had to supply to our staff members as they needed it so that we could be able to work from home. And then, of course, our schedule changed a bit. You know, we started, there was a time when I think we were doing daily check-ins online, and then that changed to, to a bit of a less frequency. Like sometimes we were meeting twice a week, and then we ended up meeting once a week, and we're pretty good now on a once a week staff meeting schedule. And then there are many other things that we end up meeting for as well. So there were lots of those kinds of adjustments as well. And yeah, it was just a really interesting time. Of course, this was all coupled with, many just as people adjusting to the pandemic and what it meant for our own lives and our families, and how to keep in touch with our loved ones, how to adjust our own lifestyles, making plans for the future and things like that. So I know one of the things that happened to me was I moved, me and my wife, we actually moved. We now are renting our own place, and that was a really, kind of uprooted us a bit. It's a big adjustment during the pandemic, but we were really happy to be able to kind of hunker down in a new place. And my wife actually switched jobs during the pandemic as well. So that was another big adjustment for us. And then our parents moved here, different things like that. So it was interesting to see the resiliency, and there's a bit of tenacity, a tenacious spirit in our staff, because it was a hard time and it was a big adjustment. But we all really, to me anyway, I felt like we were all determined to make it work for us, and we didn't want to neglect the residents. We wanted to stay in touch. We wanted to provide for their needs while they remained in the building for the short time after the lockdown, and then of course looking after the building as it was mostly vacant during that time.
Yeah, Courtney, that, just really makes me think about, I feel like what has been such a integral shift in how we've been working together with one another and with all of the artists and creative communities that we serve over the past 15 months, is just sort of dropping any sort of external expectations and slowing down and really holding space for people's life experiences, and because everyone was really feeling the effects of the pandemic extremely differently, whether they, lost where they were living, or, chose to move out of New York City and go to a friend's country house, or move in with their parents, lost their job, all these sorts of things. And so while we were in the middle of the labor theme, as our 2020 programming was all sort of curated around, what I was finding to be, the most important key in continuing to work with our artists and creative practitioners was the emotional labor required, to just listen and to be support to artists in new and different ways in which, hadn't typically been in our repertoire. So, providing direct financial aid to folks, or just providing the opportunity for monthly or weekly convenings via Zoom to just check in with each other and see how, everybody is doing. And it wasn't so much concentrated on, the theme of labor and sort of artistic interpretations of that, but what is all of the intimate and invisible kind of work that we're all doing to just stay alive and feel grounded and stay healthy and hopefully be connected and nourished. But all of that during the pandemic, really shifted.
I was just thinking about our listener. You're probably wondering, wow, what did I tune into? What is all this? I mean, as an institution or cultural institution, for me, I place myself in the position of the listeners. One often expect, something very confident, structured. It's a program, but this conversation, I truly, truly appreciate, because it's an intimate look on the three of us as human beings working in a cultural institution. And Tony, you brought up the notion of invisible labor, that goes along with the theme of the residency, truly. And for all of us, it's not only exists within where we work, but it also exists in our daily lives, this past year and to the present and to the now. I'm curious if what your reflections are on these emotional labor that you carry.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, one thing that I myself was experiencing as a practicing artist, in addition to being an arts administrator and also holding space for and with, our artists in residence, it's just understanding the ways in which the emotional impacts of the world around us really were affecting our ability to engage with the world through creativity, right? And there were really varying degrees of engagement with that process that I was bearing witness to. And some people were just called at a cellular level to process what they were experiencing, and all of the emotional, sort of tumultuous experiences that they were having from the pandemic, compounded by, all of the social inequities that were being grossly laid bare by the pandemic itself, and access to healthcare and to affordable housing and income, and processing all of that through their work. And then there were other people who were focusing their labor on, life and supporting their families and their loved ones, whether it was elder care for an at-risk parent, or homeschooling their children, or doing both, or looking after neighbors and community members who were unhoused or experiencing lack of access to food or other, material supplies. Yeah, and so I felt like that the creative work was really being channeled really differently, depending on what people's emotional capacities were in the moment.
That's a pun. I wonder if you could speak to also your experience as a practicing artist, and also as an alumni of our residency program, with such an intimate look into what residency life was like, and now your experience as a staff member as well, and then undergoing this really fast, difficult transition during the pandemic. So just kind of speak to your experience as to just some insights into what that has been like for you.
Yeah, and I'll speak with the emotional labor in mind. When the pandemic hit and we abruptly had to stop, the emotional labor that I carried were on multiple levels. Having been a resident at the Santa Fe Art Institute in the immigration residency, I knew what it was like to live there. In fact, I lived there for 2 months, and I subsequently returned as an alumni fellow and lived there for 1.5 years. So obviously, my heart went out to the residents who were left there. And I felt helpless, to be honest. I didn't know what to do. And culturally, where I'm from, we express a lot of care through food. I'm sure that's similar to many, many cultures. So that was the only thing that I knew, is to express care through food. I placed the emotions, the emotional labor onto the making of the food. And I feel that I think I can relate to what you brought up, Tony, about transferring your creative energy to care. And that's what I did in the kitchen. So it was March 13th. I remembered very clearly when we had to kind of pack up and leave. But because I lived fairly close to campus at the time, those who remain, few residents that were waiting to get their flights, arrange their travels, I ended up just cooking and bringing food to the resident. On a personal level, the emotional levels, I think the emotional labor kicks in of being available for my family who are far away and carrying that as well and managing my emotions of all the what the pandemic have brought up, especially the feeling of isolation. And that was a huge trigger for me, um, of huge trigger in a sense that it excavated past trauma of isolation and how do I deal with that. And I place a lot of emotions in caring for for that process. Um, I don't know if that make any sense, but I spent a lot of time managing that.
It reminds me of, the conversations that we had as a staff, while of course working remotely over the summer, last summer, and how we were considering our engagement with what was going on socially and politically during that time, and what it meant for us as a residency program that really focuses on social justice issues, tries to engage community and other partners in these ideas and ways of engaging in society. And also, what we had to do to take care of our own selves during that time. During our residency program has dealt with some really pressing issues as our themes for the residency. Of course, last summer, what we saw with the protest for racial justice, for accountability and policing, for a shift in the way that communities of color, particularly Black people and other BIPOC communities, were being disenfranchised in various ways during a pandemic. SFAI had lots of conversations, explorations into our messaging, the way we engage with these topics virtually, what it meant for future engagements. And one of the interesting things that we arrived at in terms of care and really being intentional about care is SFAI really intentionally slowed down and started looking at our processes. We started exploring the ways that we work. We started, talking about our place in this kind of world of exploration and social justice. What is it that we can actually do? What is true to form for us? What it means to be an institution, what it means to actually engage with community. And of course, New Mexico and Santa Fe has this history that cannot be ignored no matter what work you're doing no matter what field or sector you find yourselves in. New Mexico has a history that has to be taken into consideration in all of those conversations. So one of the things we did was we slowed down. We started having conversations about our processes as a staff. We utilized various methods to kind of arrive at a really useful and beneficial and caring way to work with each other. We started formalizing our understandings and beliefs around care, capacity. We have these compass points. We just kind of have these benchmarks that we can all come back to in each of our projects and things that we do, so that we can have a high level of accountability and also take care of each other and enjoy the work and really be of benefit to the artistic community and the social justice community here in New Mexico.
Yeah, and thinking about accountability, I mean, moving beyond the internal work that we had undertaken for a number of months and are continuing with as we move forward. I mean, I think we've always been a pretty introspective organization that's constantly reflecting back on who we are and who we serve and how, and what are the impacts of the work that we do. Something that shifted immediately in the summer, sort of when the pandemic was reaching a fever pitch, and all of the social unrest around police brutality and racial inequity was really coming to the fore here in the US. One of the responses that we took was the creation of the Tilt podcast. And the first episode, and the ways in which we could call upon our broader community of creative practitioners to encourage not only accountability, but direct action and support for communities that were experiencing, systemic abuse, and specifically supporting Black communities. And so working with our, some of our alumni from various themes to talk about what are the ways in which non-Black identifying folks can get involved in supporting the anti-racist work that we're really doing internally at SFAI, and funneling the money, that we had in our coffers to specifically support Black-run organizations that are doing good work around anti-racism across the US. And having that investment in direct action and being able to hopefully encourage and inspire others to make those shifts within their own lives as well was something that I was really proud of that we were able to do. And that I think the spirit of that deeper engagement is something that we are continuing to move forward with together as an organization. What are the ways that we can not only support and amplify, but directly invest and become accomplices with different communities who are doing this deep grassroots work around issues that are pertinent not only here in New Mexico, but on a national and global level as well.
So guys, I want to circle back in our conversation about care. Care in the sense of care as an individual. For me personally, I had to make sure that I allow time for myself to reflect and to slow down and to care and to take in on how you word it, Tony, tumultuous unfolding moments. And I always turn to the kitchen to cultivate that care. So I ended up cooking quite a lot. Yes, you read in the papers, you hear other podcasts, people say people cook a lot and people get tired of it, la 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 la. I never get tired of being in the kitchen because I get to create comfort food. You know, how many Thai restaurants are there in Santa Fe, let alone New Mexico? How many Asian markets are there in Santa Fe? Zero. So I had to revert to the kitchen to create a sense of comfort. And there's no other way to express care than delicious food in my stomach. Joking aside, um, it was very it, my intent was very clear, is to recreate my mom's recipes, um, of what she used to make when I was a child growing up in the US. And back to the feeling of isolation, for us as a family growing up in the US, immigrating here, it brought that sense of just not being at home. And it was only in the kitchen and the food that my mom and my father made gave us that sense of home. So the pandemic brought about these past trauma of displacement. And the only way that I knew how to revert back and to create that sense of care was back in the kitchen. So I started to replicate my mom and my father's recipe, and to take time to create that, to take time to draw out the images in my sketchbook, to take the time to write down the recipes so that I can pass that on to my niece and nephews, so that I can, whenever I return back to Los Angeles, to reintroduce these recipes again and share it with my family members. So that's what I did quite a lot during the pandemic. And that gave me a sense of rootedness, groundedness, in order to function working for a cultural institution where I had to be there and be present for not only my colleagues, but virtually to our residents, and also in person to the Story Maps Fellows. I had to be present, but the only way to be present was to make sure that I'm grounded, and that's back in the kitchen. So yeah, I want to kind of circle back about care. And I'm curious what you guys did to, to make sure that you're cared for in order to function at work.
Yeah, that sense of rootedness and groundedness, I think, was something that, you know, we were all searching for and finding in different ways. And it was so important during this period of such great upheaval, you know, and constant change and challenges. And yeah, the pandemic for me, you know, was challenging psychologically, as well as far as my bodily health was concerned, because I'm at high risk. I live with multiple autoimmune conditions and a chronic pulmonary disease, and you know, so I was really scared, totally freaked out about the possibility of getting sick. And I'm extremely grateful for the privilege that I have to maintain work through the Art Institute during the pandemic, and to be able to work from home and to have the conscientious care of our executive director and coworkers to understand, you know, that we can restructure things and work differently with one another remotely. but yeah, the isolation, I mean, was also challenging. While I felt like, it was what I needed to do to keep myself safe, it felt selfish, and it felt extremely privileged, and really struggling with how do I mitigate maintaining boundaries for my own safety while staying connected to my community and supporting people who are suffering and in greater need than I am. And so I got on social media for the first time as a way to get connected. I still have mixed feelings about it, but it was a really good tool to be able to connect and reconnect with my immediate and broader communities, and to stay informed about what was going on and potential actions and fundraisers for supporting those in need. And so I found that to be a really useful tool in a way that I had never experienced before. But mostly, like, what grounded me and what gave me a sense of rootedness and calm and nourishment was my garden. I mean, if I literally didn't have my hands and feet, in and on the dirt every single day, I'm not sure how I would have made it through last year. And really, experiencing that sense of cultivating care and slowing things down, and working with emergent strategies, of things that happen that are beyond our control, but that can be guided and shaped by attention and tenderness and commitment. And so I was learning a lot of really wonderful metaphors from my daily practice of gardening, and how I could continue showing up for you, my colleagues, as well as the artists and community members that we are serving through our work at SFAI. And so, yeah, my garden and tending to those plants and being with them and learning from them every day was extremely nourishing, in addition to being able to grow my own medicine and food, and feeling like I had that deep connection to the earth and to place and to time in a way that didn't feel as crazy as everything was outside of the garden.
So we got garden, we got the kitchen. Courtney, how do you stay grounded and care for yourself to make sure that you're present and you show up and we support one another?
I think the biggest thing for me, at the onset of the emergency orders that limited capacity for businesses and for our office in particular, I think the biggest thing for me was sort of reintegrating myself into my meditation practice. Truthfully, I had started neglecting my practice quite a bit before the pandemic because I was just so busy all the time, like keep working and trying to keep in touch with family and taking care of my wife and our home. So I started becoming more intentional about contributing to my sitting group, my local sitting group here in Santa Fe. We say sitting, just in case people don't know what that means. It's a term for meditation. In Zen in particular, sometimes you just hear them say sitting, which doesn't sound like much, but it's one of the hardest things that I try to integrate into my life because it's really difficult to just sit still. I find it difficult, even though I've been doing it for some years. It was really wonderful to have a virtual community to connect with, because I really did feel in this increasing sense of isolation. You know, my wife and I decided that we weren't like going to travel anywhere. We didn't go anywhere during the pandemic. We didn't even leave the city of Santa Fe at all for months and months and months. And that, you know, that was hard because I'm actually used to visiting my family once or twice a year. You know, I have to fly to do that. Of course, we did the same thing with her family as well, multiple times a year. And so we finding ourselves not being able to do that, but also not being able to really regularly meet up with friends and my staff, of course, that we used to do all the time. So this is something that, you know, those who are familiar with the SFAI staff, we love to go out to lunch with each other and go to restaurants with each other. And of course, we had events in our building pretty regularly, you know, every month almost, where we were able to not only put on a really great program and a show and invite the community and have these great speakers and performances and lectures and film screenings. You know, SFAI was doing so much of that. That also was time for the staff to be with each other in a really fun and lighthearted way, and to share a drink with each other and to share a laugh about things and talk about how hard it is to put on programs and to put on events and all the labor it takes. So we found ourselves without that during the pandemic. And of course, I was really missing that. So it was really wonderful to have a few different communities to join with online virtually in a safe manner. And other things that we did, you know, my wife and I, we do a lot of hiking on the trails here mostly in Santa Fe. We haven't really gotten around New Mexico as much as we should. But we do frequent the trails here in Santa Fe, and we started doing that a lot more, which is really great. Just a way to get some fresh air. And, you know, we are inside working remotely 40 hours a week or more. So it was really important for us to get out and get fresh air, take walks regularly. We were really lucky to have her parents spend a lot more time in Santa Fe because it was safer to be in Santa Fe than to be in New York City at that time, which is where they were living. And so we felt really lucky to have loved ones close by. That was really, really useful for us, really wonderful to be able to have them so close by. And I think some other ways that I really took care of myself and tried to cultivate a sense of balance. You know, there was just a lot of self-exploration I think I went through. I was very stressed during the pandemic. There was kind of this sense of mounting crises happening, not being able to see my family because I have to travel to see them, not being able to hang out with the staff as often as we were accustomed to, not seeing residents, not having events and things like that. I started, you know, just slowing down. I started making sure that we were, for instance, saving money was really important to me because I ended up paying off debt so that I could go back to school. And I really wanted to kind of have this achievement of like, I'm going to finish my college degree while I have permission to, you know, focus on that while we're at home, not going out as much. So I have a little bit more time in that sense, like even just like not having to commute back and forth to the office every single day, and being able to pay off a little bit of debt and go back to school. So that's what I did, just felt really great. I'm in college classes now. I am slowly but surely working my way towards an undergraduate degree, which is really cool. And I think something that SFAI really helped me do as well, during the height of the racial justice protests after the death of George Floyd, SFAI gave me an opportunity to write an article, which was published on the website. And I really appreciated that chance. And it ended up being something that was more than just writing an article. I found myself having to take some real deliberate time over the course of about a week to kind of process through the emotions I was feeling as a Black man in a society that, you know, continues to have these such such, profound problems with racial justice in our country. And, I'm someone who comes from a radical tradition. My grandfather's a former Black Panther. He was just recently released from prison. My mom sued the city of Springfield, Illinois for racial discrimination while she was a police officer, and we wrote a book about it. So, given the opportunity to kind of slow down and think about it, what I wanted to say during that time last summer, when when the nation was acknowledging the death of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, were some of the most notable cases at that time. I really appreciated that. I slowed down. I had like this mourning period, where I was like just really enraged and upset about what was happening. I took time to think about it. I wrote and erased things and wrote it again, and had all these different iterations, and got editing advice from Jamie, our executive director. And I read a bunch of articles that I hadn't yet read before. I tried to make connections to how, the way BIPOC communities were dealing with the pandemic at the time. And so that was really wonderful. And it ended up being picked up by the local news weekly paper, The Reporter. So that, again, was a way that SFAI offered us a chance to explore what care looked like for us, a chance to think about it, to process as an individual, but then contribute something, contribute a perspective, and kind of contribute to the message that SFAI was trying to send at that time. So that was really great for me. And yeah, I think now I'm just, I feel much more grounded, and I'm trying to have even more consistency in the way I show up. SFAI's exploration of internal processes has also really helped me in that sense, because now I have a greater understanding of how my staff members need me to show up. And having that exploration that we've done over these past few months, I think has been really beneficial in that way for me also.
Yeah, right. Like we get to acknowledge that we're people and we're vulnerable and fallible, and we have full and rich lives that extend so far beyond just whatever our titles are, and the typical things that we would do for work. And yeah, I think it's great to be able to hold space for that fullness of our experience as human beings, tender souls, walking through this earth together and doing the best that we can, right? Moving forward from this place of, yeah, I don't know, just kind of the traditional expectations of like what work means, and the value of productivity and products and measurable successes and all this kind of stuff that, I never really identified with, but is so much a part of the system that measures and values who we are. And yeah, so just like really drilling down into the core of like our humanity as individuals, and together, like how we as people comprise this organization, and like what can we do together with like with our people power, and with our humanity, and with our individual skill sets, and our vulnerability, and our deep care for ourselves and for one another, that doesn't necessarily show up in the ways that like in the before times it was expected to. And so I'm really grateful for that opportunity to evolve and change and grow with you together.
I'm gonna segue a bit. What do you guys look forward most about returning to working in the office and working with artists in person?
So as the staff, we've recently started having conversations about what, kind of a gradual return to normalcy might look like. And we've been very intentional about making sure that we all maintain some agency in how we ease back into this sort of a sense of regularity, but also, as we still have a sense of caution, We're trying to be responsive to the changing situation and the kind of unpredictableness of the situation. We know that there, as sort of what you've been hearing in the media, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, there's increased vaccinations, there's dropping cases and things like that. But then there's this bit of like, kind of yo-yo effect that's happening right now, as states start experimenting with reopening. So, and we know that's going to continue to be the case. There's no expectation that, this sense of caution will ever go away. We know that we're going to be dealing with this virus for a long time. So I think what I'm looking forward to is, in addition to spending more time at the office and seeing staff members more often, I think I've seen you all more in the last couple of months than we have for most of the pandemic, because we did the prep for the return of the residency program, and having to get things done at the building. We've taken time to make upgrades. We fixed a lot of things in the building. We have to be there more often now as a sense of security and safety for the building as well. So we get to see each other a little more. I am looking forward to, well, there is a sense of like having a more varied environment to live and work in. I spend a lot of time at home in this room that I'm in right now for hours at a time during days. So it's nice to be able to go back to the office and have a different environment. It's really nice to be on the campus for all of its intricacies with the way we deal with the campus. The campus is actually really pretty in some ways, particularly in the spring. I've decided to take a short walk during the days that I'm at the building, which are usually Tuesdays and Fridays. I just try to take a short walk around the campus to get a sense of what it's like. The campus right now is still mostly vacant. So it's like to get some fresh air, and all the trees are blooming, and we have a lot of prairie dogs that I like to just kind of see scamper around the grounds. So I'm looking forward to doing that more often. And hopefully, if New Mexico in general and in the nation as well, if we continue to make progress to kind of suppress the virus and its spread as much as possible, then I am very much looking forward to having some safe events at the building again. However that looks, some engagements with the community with our various programs, and showcasing our residents again, being able to really be champions for the work that they do, and making sure that it benefits both SFAI and the residents and the community. SFAI did a great job with our events programming since I have worked for it, the last 4 years. Our public events have been really wonderful, and we've gotten a great response, and I'm very much looking forward to safely and gradually returning to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to in-person events in the future as well. That was really where a lot of my joy was found in, working directly with our artists in residence and fellows and community members to co-create or curate programs that, engage creativity in unexpected and unusual ways to deal with like really difficult issues and idiosyncratic things that are specific to, particular communities, experiences, and how can creativity bridge the gaps between different communities in our understanding of and engagement with these issues. And I don't know, there's just not the same sort of energy in creating those events remotely and on Zoom or via Instagram as there is, when you're physically stepping foot into someone's studio and totally surrounded by their, materials and aspects of their creative process, and just get immersed in all of the details of their work and how much of themselves that they pour into their work and the work they do with different communities. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's going to take me a minute to get comfortable with being with large groups of people. So again, I'm taking that mantra of like slowing down and just going step by step and not feeling like we need to rush back into anything. So I guess ultimately what I look forward to most on the near horizon, as we emerge from this period of remote work and self-isolation, is to just be in physical space with other artists and pop into their studios and speak artist to artist about where they're at with their creative process, and have these really casual, unscripted conversations about where their work is taking them in the moment. That's such a joy to be able to just kind of drop in on that on the regular as part of working at SFAI. And really having that one-on-one connection. So I think that's going to be my baby step from working remotely. I'm looking forward to just having in real life one-on-ones more regularly with our artists in residence, and then working my way up to eventually, in-person events.
I diddle what you just said, Tony. It is really about the one-on-one. I look forward to meeting our artists in residence and having these impromptu conversation about the work that's invested on the theme. This particular year is labor. So I look forward to that. I look forward to having a meal together in the courtyard now that it's really beautiful out. I had a taste of that this past 6 weeks as we welcomed 3 residents to SFAI. I had the wonderful opportunity to personally get to know the 3 artists in a meaningful way. So I look forward to more of that. And I concur. I mean, like, I look forward to, in a broader sense, SFAI taking more of a leadership role, because we're one of the few organization that's at Midtown campus. And right now it's in its derelict state. And I look forward to seeing more activities on what we can do. I had a taste of that in organizing the social structure self-guided exhibition towards the end of last year, and working with artists from the community. And I look forward to more when we can do that safely, is to reimagine what we can do creatively there on that site, working with community members, organization, our neighbors, to see what that will be. And that excites me so much. I know it may not be this year, it may be next year, but in light of all the newspaper clippings and articles about Midtown and people thinking of what the Midtown campus can be, and the master developer, pulling out, all that said and done, at the end of the day, we're stuck in that corner there. And I'm looking forward to see how we can reimagine that space in a really fun, creative way. That's on a really much broader scale. But in the immediate, what I look forward to when I return back to work is really that one-on-one conversation with staff members, with artists. The fact that we can have a toast at the end of the week and celebrate. Those small gestures are something that I truly miss.
You made me think about something else that I would like to carry forward from this more introspective and slowed down time during the pandemic, which is personally a big shift for me, but I think is also lending itself to a sort of larger shift for us organizationally, which is, I put so much of my time and energy and care into working with these temporary communities of artists who come from across the country and throughout the world. We always have a handful of local residents integrated into all of our thematic residency years, but the pandemic, basically by slowing down and being rooted in one place for this period of time, I've found the opportunity to create deeper connections with my immediate community. I live in Albuquerque and, would commute to Santa Fe when we were working at the office, and just getting to know some different organizations and individuals who are doing some great work in Albuquerque, as well as Santa Fe and all around northern New Mexico. And really looking forward to continuing to deepen these relationships with, as you said, our neighbors, Netapan, both in Midtown Santa Fe, but sort of in a broader scope in New Mexico, and looking at the ways in which we can more deeply and meaningfully continue our engagements with our neighbors. And so that's something that I'm really looking forward to as well.
It's been a wonderful experience exploring kind of these shifting dynamics with each other, and getting this really intimate look into what it's like to work at a small arts organization, and particularly during a pandemic, during a time when, the whole world made this huge shift at the same time almost. I mean, within a week, the whole world was locking down and restricting movement. And then there was this new language that started emerging, what is social distancing? What's physical distancing? What's quarantining? There was, we all just the whole world got a crash course in public health, and but also we started to see how small the world is, just how quickly, the effect of one thing can spread. And SFAI in particular started seeing, just this interconnected nature between our personal lives and our professional lives, the way we have to stay safe and protect our own selves, but also maintain some sense of connection with our local community, as we had been doing before. And then being honest about how we work with each other, take care of each other, being intentional about slowing down and giving ourselves permission to really explore really deeply. I mean, for crying out loud, we changed our mission statement, we got all these new values and compass points that we're working with. We really underwent a really deep transformation at SFAI. And now we're in this time where, maybe not to be too cliche, but like things are kind of moving ahead slowly, and there's this gradual sense of a return to something that's normal, but we're maintaining this cautious approach. And SFAI in particular is dedicated to making sure that we all have agency in how we move forward out of this pandemic, and allowing each other the space to be able to do that. So, I just wanted to give us a chance to share some last thoughts about, anything else about what you're looking forward to coming to the office, or future plans for, as we move into a summer that hopefully will have more opportunities. We'll see. Hopefully New Mexico does a good job. Hopefully the United States does a good job. But any last feelings or thoughts from you, Netapan and Tony, about where SFAI is headed and what to look forward to?
I'm super duper excited about the direction of the podcast, Tilt Podcast, because I see it as and we talked about this I see the Tilt podcast as an audio collage that merges different points of view on varying topics and stories that represent voices from our neighbors. I mean, mostly New Mexico, and in some cases, probably beyond. So I'm looking forward to having more meaningful conversations with what other organizations are doing in a creative way. I'm looking forward to meeting individuals, artists, creative practitioners, cultural bearers on what they're doing. I'm excited about where Tilt Podcast is headed, and this being a container for these stories and audio collages. That excites me. Also excites me about what we can do activate these physical spaces around our buildings creatively. So those, I think the Tilt podcast, the new where it's headed for me is most exciting. Whether it's in forms of interviews, as you had suggested, Courtney, these field recordings, even recordings of sounds, and being experimental, that excites me.
I am excited to work with you two and collaborate on ways in which, creativity is helping our communities move forward through difficult times and to maintain connection and to find joy and celebrate, who we are and what's the great power that we have when we work together. I think that's what I'm most excited about is this collaboration that is the Tilt podcast.
And we really hope you, the listener, are also excited to take this exploration with us. We're going to bring you lots of really diverse content. You're going to get this really great look into SFAI, but also the larger New Mexico community in Santa Fe and maybe other voices as well. We're going to try to bring you into the stories. You're going to hear the site, you're going to get the sounds of what it's like to explore these concepts in a creative way. We hope you will continue to join us as we take this exploration. And thank you for joining us for this conversation.
This has been another episode of Tilt, creatively shifting perspectives on complex issues, a podcast from the Santa Fe Art Institute produced in the traditional territories of the Tewa peoples. Tilt invites listeners to see complex issues in new ways through the lens of creativity. Each episode will bring you an audio collage assembling a multitude of viewpoints on a different topic. We're going to include interviews, field recordings, soundscapes, stories, all representing the diverse communities, creative practitioners, and culture bearers of New Mexico. Tune in on the fourth Friday of every month. You'll hear from us again on June 25th. Our next episode is titled Cultivating Community. The host conversation was recorded using Zoom, and we edit the show using Audacity and GarageBand. The music we obtain online through royalty-free licensing. I'm Courtney Andar. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again next month.